The Alien franchise is a mess. Not any more than any other franchise, mind you. It's not like a complete disaster. In fact, it arguably has more good movies than most franchises that have as many entries as it does. I'd say of the 9 films that exist at the time of this video, about 4.5 of them are pretty good. I'll let you decide which are which, but one of them is Prometheus, so take that for what you will. I'll die in that hill. Well, most of it, at least.
I like rocks. I love rocks. Now it's clear you two don't give a shit about rocks.
For a series, though, that was never made with the intention of spanning 6 decades and existing in virtually every form of popular entertainment, it's managed to hang on pretty well, despite never reaching the cultural or box office heights other larger franchises have. It's been able to maintain a spot in pop culture for a long time now, much longer than most IPs on its same level, where things like Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street and all kinds of other mid-level franchises have mostly fallen by the wayside. Alien is still here. Much like the xenomorph itself, Alien is a franchise that simply refuses to die. It's not always thriving, but it is surviving.
You are one ugly mother.
Now, originally this video was going to be more of a broad retrospective overview of the whole series, covering everything from 1979 up until now and going over the highs, the lows, the trash, the hot takes, and everything in between. And while I might come back to that at some time in the future, what I really found myself latching onto on my recent rewatches, and what I want to talk about in this video, is just one movie. Mostly. The most recent entry in the franchise, Alien Romulus. While I could of course yap about every movie in this series by themselves or lumped together, there's just something about Romulus that I can't shake and I think warrants a deeper dive. It has this very unique quality where I still can't quite tell if I love it or I hate it or if it's underrated or overrated. It's one of the most fascinating franchise films out there, not all for good reasons, but I think it serves as this prime example of everything great and terrible about franchise filmmaking. It covers the whole spectrum. If someone were to say it's the best Alien film since Aliens, I wouldn't say they're wrong, and if someone else thinks it's totally hack and down in the pits with the absolute worst of the franchise, I wouldn't push back that much either, and in the year since its release, my opinion on it really hasn't changed much at all. And that opinion is that I don't really have a consistent opinion on it. It's this really strange movie to pin down for a lot of reasons because it's pulling you in pretty much every direction a movie can. Like all franchise films, virtually every choice made in it is in some way a reaction to what came before. Not all terrible, but most certainly downstream of the legacy of the previous movies. Everything from the story structure to the kinds of characters it follows to the themes to everything. It cannot be viewed outside the scope of the rest of the series. So, before we get into Romulus, let's do a quick recap of how the series got to this point. So, the thing about the Alien franchise is that you obviously have the first film, which is one of the most iconic sci-fi horror movies ever made. It's one of the all-time greats, we all know this. Then you get to Aliens, and similarly, it also turns out to be one of the best movies of its kind. It shifts its genre from horror to action, and is able to expand on the lore and up the stakes while still maintaining the themes and identity of the first film. It is a perfect sequel, right up there with The Empire Strikes Back. After those two though, the franchise enters into the state most franchises get to at some point, which is a stage where it gets increasingly harder to conceive decent ideas for sequels. This is how you get Alien 3, which while not terrible and has some good stuff going on, does immediately lose a lot of momentum by cutting all ties from the last film. Still find that super annoying. And then Alien Resurrection, which is a much harder film to defend, though again does have some okay French ideas in it, just further pushes the franchise down the path of diminishing returns. Then of course you have the AVP movies, which really only exist to show a predator fight a xenomorph, which of course is awesome, but the problem there is there's like 90 minutes of boring ass movies surrounding those moments, so not great. And then you get a Ridley Scott return with Prometheus and Covenant, which radically tries to expand the lore of the series and take it in a new direction to mostly mixed results.
I like rocks. I love rocks.
So by the time we get to Romulus, the franchise has gone down pretty much every path it can. It's tried the genre bending, it's had great directors come in, it's done more out there ideas, it's done cheap and easy ideas, it's tried to reinvent itself, it's pulled out every tool in the toolbox, and yet nothing was really able to stick, or at least stick for very long. And that is how you get to a point in the franchise that Romulus finds itself in, this very late stage era where the series is far past its prime, but must go on until proven to be no longer viable. Now, for most movies in this position, that is right about when the last nail in the coffin is finally hammered in there. The great filmmakers have come and gone, the ideas are mostly dried up, and audiences, for the most part, have lost interest. This is where you get films like Terminator Dark Fate, Pirates 5, Indiana Jones and the Dialysis Machine, Halloween Resurrection back in the day, and many, many more. Now, this doesn't mean that these series stay dead forever. I mean, they've literally made 5 Halloween movies after Resurrection, but movies like those usually result in the franchise being put in timeout for a while at the very least, and more often than not, if and when they do come back, it's with radical changes across the board. And before I went and saw Romulus, that is pretty much exactly where I expected that movie to take the Alien franchise, into a long overdue nap, only to come back after the taste of it had been washed from the public's mouth. I mean, the signs were there. Originally, it wasn't even supposed to get released in theaters at all. It was going to be dumped on Hulu, and while sure that route worked out well for Prey, that's not exactly what you want to see out of a franchise as iconic as Alien. Generally speaking, studios do not pull major franchise films from theaters unless they have absolutely no faith in them. So to say that I was skeptical of the movie going in was a dramatic understatement. Now, Fede Alvarez being in the director's chair did give me some amount of pause on that idea, considering that he's done a few pretty good movies in the past, including a very competent modern Evil Dead remake, but my usual assumption with studio films like this is that the director usually gets sidelined no matter how capable they might be. All of this to say, my expectations were set very, very low, but then I actually went and saw it, and this is where my fascination with the movie began.
Maybe it's because I'm on this seafood diet. Seafood, I eat it.
So, right from the jump with Romulus, it's clear that this movie was not half-baked or direct-to-streaming trash. In fact, it is one of the better-looking and sounding franchise films made in recent years. Not only does it hold true to the old-school 70s knobs and dials vision of the future, but it realizes it better than any installment in the franchise outside of the first 2. Every piece of tech you see is this clunky, analog, oversized box. Even small details like a spaceship having 20th century windshield wipers is very true to the specific weird style of the Alien franchise. The ships, the watches, the signs, it's all completely devoid of any creativity or life. It's this fully optimized, soulless corporate future hellscape. Even the way locations are lit is brutal and efficient. There is nothing remotely happy or hopeful to look at. It is a total nightmare world. I mean, this whole opening sequence on the mining colony is just incredible. The set design is off the fucking charts. So much of it is real sets and actual design, tangible things, and combined with the sound design, it just totally immerses you in the world immediately. And that's not even mentioning how it sets up the themes of the movie as well. Just like the original movie, Romulus holds true to the miserable corporate future of Earth, where Weyland-Yutani basically holds total dominion over seemingly every major space frontier we're shown. You never hear about nation states or laws or like interhuman conflicts. It's all just the company. It dictates where you live, how long you live there. It takes years off your life as essentially indentured servants living in these company towns or years-long space missions on company ships, and it's constantly reinforced that human life means absolutely nothing to the company. In fact, the first thing we see our protagonist in this this movie do is attempt to actually get the company to honor her contract and let her go. You see on their screen that she is eligible, and she even tells them that her parents died working on the same colony, and yet their response is to simply rewrite the rules on the spot and enslave her for another 5 to 6 years, a choice of which she has no capability of fighting. So not even 10 minutes into the movie, it is totally clear that the people making this not only have a strong grasp on the identity of the series, but know how to execute it. Your expectations immediately get raised to a place where you expect actual quality content, and the movie continues to deliver on that promise, obviously in the incredible production and strong direction from Alvarez, but the cast as well. It opts for a very young, basically entirely Gen Z cast, well, and also someone born in 1931, but we'll get to that later. Going with the young cast though is kind of a stroke of genius, I think. Not only is it a cast of mainly unknowns, which is always nice, but they give the movie such a jolt of energy. Watching a bunch of 20-year-olds run around a ship trying not to die is a whole lot different than watching a bunch of 40-year-olds doing the exact same thing. Not that I'm ageist or anything, I mean clearly middle-aged people kick ass just fine in this franchise, but it's a nice change of pace from the typical cast you see in these movies. The characters are very inexperienced and much less calm and far more erratic than the crew of the Nostromo or the well-trained Space Marines or any other cast of people we've seen deal with xenomorphs in the past.
Hang around, man. Just get out.
I'm not playing around. There's something in the water.
What do you mean? What is it?
I don't know what it is. There's something in the fucking water.
They're also a lot smaller in numbers as well, which might not work well for a story that focuses on a mission with super high stakes and difficulty, but Romulus goes for maybe the most simple small-scale plot this series has seen since the first movie. The whole thing boils down to these kids wanting to escape the hellish mining colony they're all trapped on and fly off to a different world where there is some amount of hope and sunlight. And to do that, all they have to do is board this abandoned space station currently drifting by their colony, loot it for their cryopods and fuel, bring it all back to their ship, set the coordinates, and simply hibernate for a few years and wake up in their new home. It's a very simple, very relatable goal that you believe these people are capable of achieving. It also makes perfect sense after the first 10 minutes of absolute misery you see these people live in. Them all being very young is no accident. The shelf life of the workers on this colony cannot be very long, and all of them have lost people to it. So you either try to get out now, or you get stuck here for the rest of your likely short, painful life. Any potential risk is worth it. There's also some really nice character dynamics going on too, being that again, all these characters have lost people. They're all very attached to who they have left. Rain is very protective of her reprogrammed android Andy, who's basically like her brother. Tyler and Kay are siblings and only have each other, and their cousin Bjorn, who is very attached to his adoptive sister Navarro after losing his mom. It's this sad collection of people who only have each other left, and even though they don't all get along that well, it's still more family than any of them will ever have. Their desperation for a future is what bonds them together. It also makes them completely unwilling to let each other go as the movie goes on, which is a nice touch. No matter what logic might suggest that one of them is likely dead or about to be dead, it does not stop them from trying to save each other at every turn. They act exactly as they should, not always rationally, but very human and very relatable. They're all played very well too. They come off like hot-headed, emotional young people that don't realize they've bitten off more than they can chew, which is exactly how they should come off. And David Johnson, who plays Andy, especially turns in a truly exceptional performance. Pretty much every Alien film has an android character. It's one of those things that just kinda has to be there, and you would think that would get stale after a while, but if anything, it's one of the aspects that keeps this franchise consistently interesting. Ash is this awesome twist villain in the first film. Winona Ryder in Resurrection is super interesting, and I mean, say what you will about Prometheus and Covenant, but David is undeniably a great character. It makes those movies worth watching just for him. Hell, even the most normal of the androids in the series, Bishop, works great as this subversion of the typical evil android character. He's just a normal, cool guy that plays that knife game super fucking fast. It's awesome. And in this, Andy carries on that tradition of being the standout character of the whole bunch. Since he's an older reprogrammed model, he has this very specific weird personality where his only goal is to do what's best for Rain and be with her and help her. But the way David Johnson plays him is this perfect balance where at the same time he has the emotional distance and apathy of an android and also seems totally dependent on Rain for everything. There is a real level of comfort he has when he's with her that is missing when they're separate, and you really buy it. He manages to come off emotional without coming off human, which is very impressive. I cannot say enough good things about his performance, especially when he essentially has to play a different version of his character like halfway into the film. There is a tremendous amount of range on display in that character, and you get so much time with him too, and all the characters really. The first like 40 or so minutes really takes its time in a good way. It's this slow burn, tension building, character building intro that tees up the movie to take off once the shit hits the fan. There's the whole sequence on the colony, then time showing them leaving the colony and boarding the ship, then even more time watching them explore the ship and get the supplies they came for. It's all dragged out so much longer than films like this usually have the patience for, but it's not in the least bit boring. You're treated to these incredible sets and visuals, you learn about the characters and their relationships. It's like watching any other movie that just so happens to take place in a super sci-fi horror setting. Like, if you ever watch movies and don't understand exactly what good directing looks like, this is exactly what it is. It is a movie's ability to keep the audience consistently engaged regardless of what is happening on screen. People yapping, engaging. People walking around, engaging. Spaceship docking with another spaceship, engaging. People walking around a spaceship, engaging. All of this in the hands of lesser talent would come off excruciatingly boring and dry, but with people that know what they're doing, it is as entertaining as anything. And even when the action starts to ramp up with the first facehugger sequence, it's pulled off just as well. We're gonna get a whole lot into the nostalgia element of this movie because it's not all great, but one of the things I think this movie actually does really well in regards to the typical Alien elements is finding new ways of using things like the facehugger, for example. Pretty much since the first film, the way in which characters in these movies deal with the xenomorph and the other threats surrounding them is almost always the same. There's occasionally some new ideas here and there, but the lore for the most part has more or less been set in stone since Aliens. At least as far as the traditional stuff goes. There has of course been all kinds of additional lore with things like Prometheus and Resurrection, but as far as dealing with the alien in a vacuum, that has been relatively unchanged. In this though, they actually come up with some new ways of using a lot of this stuff. When a facehugger gets on one of them, instead of doing the typical thing of waiting it out, not knowing what's going to happen until the baby finally bursts out, the crew is actually extremely proactive and comes up with a solution in minutes that works, and it makes sense. Using the cryo fuel to freeze it before it has time to react might not seem like the most innovative thing in the universe, but it kind of is for a franchise film like this. It's a small thing, but it shows some real effort and creativity on the part of the filmmakers. They even carry this over into a sequence later in the movie where the characters are able to seem invisible to the facehuggers by raising the temperature in the room to match their own body temperature. Again, a very small thing, but it's able to create this great little horror sequence where they have to keep their anxiety in check so as not to raise their body heat while they walk through a facehugger infested hallway. It actually kind of reminded me of like Alien Isolation in that way. It's a very video gamey inspired sequence, and I mean that in a good way. Even other details like the x-ray scanner showing the alien embryo inside people, or the halfway in between baby and adult vagina cocoon they encounter and try and take out, or being able to swap out memory drives for Andy throughout the movie and resetting him when he needs, adds all kinds of potential types of sequences that weren't in the franchise before. Like, oh no, we're stuck in this room with a bunch of facehuggers, what do we do? Well, here's this chip from the station's android that has access to the door controls. Great, let's plug it in, but oh shit, before Andy can open the door, he has to reboot. Now we have to survive for a few extra minutes more than we intended. The movie is full of these sequences that have clear problems, clever solutions, and super high tension, time-sensitive, high-stakes moments. Sometimes it works out for the characters, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's a little bit of both, but it's this really nice loop of action and tension that does not feel cheap or mindless. It's all very well thought out. Nothing the characters do to get out of a situation feels like the movie just came up with some random dumb bullshit. It leaves these tools spread around the movie for our characters to use, and that's exactly what happens. You know, like a movie. And that confidence mixed with the restraint it shows makes the first half of the movie damn near perfect in my opinion. I mean, it isn't like fucking Fury Road here. It's not out here making cinematic history, but as far as a very late stage installment in a franchise, you really can't ask for anything better. It rides that line of doing its own thing and telling its own story while still very much existing in the same kind of movie the franchise is known for. It gives the audience what they expect while also not just recreating the old movies beat for beat. At least that's the case for the first half. The opening on the colony, the boarding of the ship, the initial encounter with the facehuggers, all of that is pulled off just beautifully. But then we get to this.
You don't help her, you run. Get out, however you got it.
Now, this video is not about the ethics of using dead actors' likenesses to perform after they have passed. That is too much of a discussion to just cram into a video like this. But to be clear, I do find this extremely disturbing and wrong, and also very concerning for the future of the art form. I don't care if the family's estate signs off on it, or if there is never anything in the actor's contract saying they couldn't do this. If you're dead, you should not be made to perform as this hollow puppet of your former self. Hell, even if you for some reason are cool with this being done to you, I'm still against it because it takes jobs away from real human actors that have the ability to, you know, actually act and add something to the scene that a corpse can't. If you go fully down that road, then new things will actually cease to exist and all entertainment will be the same empty, recycled slurry over and over again forever. If you really need to bring an old character back for a project like this, here's an idea. Just cast someone that looks and or sounds like them. We've been doing this ever since films have been a thing, and you know what? It's worked out pretty well. In the case of this movie though, you don't even need to do that. My gripe with this Ian Holm Rook aka Ash thing is not just the ethics of it, it's also just totally unnecessary in the context of the movie. Like I said, pretty much every Alien film has an android character or two in it, so it makes sense to have a character like this in Romulus. That's fine, but it's not like every android in the Alien universe is the same model. In fact, most of the ones we see are completely different. It can be literally anyone, any gender, any age, any size, any fucking accent. Just plug any random actor in there and no one is going to bat an eye. This character being the same model as Ash only works to distract the audience and undermine the movie because it just looks terrible. Maybe one day when the quality of these CGI resurrection characters is equal to that of the movies they're in, we can have a serious conversation about using them, but until then, it just makes the movies they're in objectively worse, especially for those in the audience who don't get anything out of the reference of it. Like, when I saw this in the theater last year, I was next to a couple who clearly did not understand this callback, and they were, of course, totally confused. And sure, you can say that most people watching this will have seen the original, and hey, you're probably right, but I'm sorry, you cannot hinge an important element of your film on the expectation that everyone who's going to watch it has also seen a different movie from 1979. The theaters are full of people who kind of just wander on in there, as weird as that may seem. I will never forget the time I saw No Way Home, opening weekend mind you, and next to me were two very old men who, after the movie, were asking me questions that indicated they had no idea what the MCU was or who Zendaya is, and yet there they were, opening weekend of MCU number 27. Extreme example? Yes, but you get the point. And this issue really starts to cascade the more the back half of the movie unfolds. The Ash thing is just the tip of the iceberg. In a lot of ways, despite how inventive and well-directed this movie is, it begins to devolve into this totally unashamedly nostalgia bait carousel where it's just pulling out cheap reference after cheap reference, none of which serve to make the movie better in any way. We go from one alien to like 100. We get the exact same conceit for the ending that's in all of these. We get shot-for-shot recreations from previous films. We get the smart guns, we get the alien colony, we get the Prometheus goo, we even get literal callback lines being used as nostalgia. I can't lie about your chances, but you have my sympathies. Get away from her, you bitch. Why would he even say that? There's just so many of these things that are so dumb, and it makes you lose respect for, again, an otherwise very good movie. It just boggles my mind. I don't understand how the same people who had all these original ideas and put all this effort into their own Alien movie just gave up in the end and rattled off all these cheap references as if the audience wouldn't be on board otherwise. Like, the thing about all this nostalgia culture in movies these days that I don't understand is that this movie already exists in the Alien franchise. There's the same tech, same outfits, same power structures, same threats. It's all already there. It's enough. You don't need to reference shit from other Alien movies because the movie itself is already that by definition. The tools you will use to make an Alien film is all the reference you need. You don't need to have literal same line callbacks. If you want to throw a reference from something else entirely as like a little wink, that's one thing, but having references to your own franchise is just completely redundant. It's just a waste of screen time that could be filled with other creative, cool stuff. Like, even in this last act, there are still moments of brilliance here and there, like using the 0G as a way of stopping the horde of aliens and then having to fly around dodging their floating blood. That fucking rules. Hell, I'm even mostly on board with the Offspring final boss. Yes, it does rely on the Prometheus goo, which I don't love, but as far as just a cool new monster in the Alien universe, it works really well in a vacuum. Really goddamn creepy too. Still can't believe that is an actual guy. That's horrifying, but the whole thing is cheapened by the fact that the way the movie devises our protagonist to defeat it is literally just the same ending of the first film. As is tradition, she puts on a suit and sucks it out into space. So nothing about this new creature really mattered at all. You could just swap it out with a regular run-of-the-mill xenomorph and nothing would change in this scene. It's just another alien that happens to be a freaky tall gross guy. Which, you know, again, it's something. All this stuff is what makes Romulus into a movie that I just cannot have a consistent opinion on. It is so close to brilliance, and in a lot of ways, it's already there, but like most franchise films, it's held back by, well, being in a big franchise. All these references and nods and callbacks and lore and just general forced association with everything that came before is kind of baked into the equation with these films, especially these days. It's almost completely unavoidable. Studios aren't likely to greenlight these movies otherwise, and audiences, no matter how much they say they want new and original things, more often than not, get upset when stuff like that isn't in their franchise films, because the other option for a franchise movie like this is something like Prometheus. It's been a while since that film came out, but if you recall, it caught a whole lot of shit back when it did. Granted, a lot of it for reasons beyond direction. We're all familiar with the Prometheus school of running, but one of the reasons it didn't land well with some audiences is because it was completely unlike any previous film in the franchise. The tech looks a lot different, the suits they wear, the ships, the vibes of the movie, the themes, the structure, the genres it's playing with. It's all very much its own thing, which for me is what makes me actually like it quite a bit relative to most of the Alien sequels and spin-offs. It's a very original movie that does not rely on one bit of nostalgia and doesn't constantly go into the well of the same old references. Hell, if you didn't know going in that this was in the Alien franchise, it is entirely possible that you could have watched almost this whole movie up to this scene without knowing it was an Alien film. But that's part of the problem, because if you watch the trailer, it is fucking putting up the blinkers that this is a capital A Alien movie. And not only that, an Alien movie directed by Ridley Scott, the whole trailer is edited as if the movie is just like all the rest. So you walk into the theater expecting that, and what you get is a mostly unrelated sci-fi film. Now, it's a pretty good sci-fi film, at least in my opinion, and my god, Charlize Theron wears a goofy space jumpsuit better than anyone ever has, but this inevitably results in a fair amount of pushback. And despite how different and on its own terms that movie is, some of the worst parts of it are the parts that tries to tie itself back to the Alien franchise proper. It's still made worse by its association to this other thing, both in the audience's expectations and its own devoted screen time to elements that don't belong in the movie they actually wanted to make. It is the exact inverse of the Alien Romulus problem, but ends up still buckling for the same reasons. Films like this are in this impossible position where no matter how much of a good idea they have for a movie and how well they're able to execute it, it will always come back to the franchise question. How does this relate to the rest? Is it a prequel or a sequel or totally unrelated? Do we bring anybody back from previous films? How much do we reference other films? Is this baiting for a sequel? And if so, where is that gonna go? How much of a new thing can we do that our fans will accept? It's this endless stream of questions and will always kneecap the potential of films like this, and yet we only get these films because of these franchises. Sure, something like Prometheus probably could have been made absent from the Alien IP with a name like Ridley Scott attached to it, but could a little sci-fi adventure film directed by Fede Alvarez starring a bunch of relatively unknown actors? Probably not. And hell, even movies like Romulus that dive headfirst into the pool of references and callbacks and nostalgia can end up being very special, beloved films in their own right. I mean, that's what Aliens is, no matter how much you realize it or not. Structurally, that film is almost a beat-for-beat retelling of the original, just on a larger scale, but it still has the exact same protagonist, same type of twist company villain. Ripley is running around with a flamethrower at the end of both of them. Ripley beats the final boss by putting on a suit and sucking the alien out of an airlock. She goes into cryosleep at the end of both of them. Aliens are crawling around in the vents. The androids both spill their milk out. It is unashamedly just doing the first film again, but in the context of an action sci-fi setting rather than a sci-fi horror one, and yet that movie is just as iconic and beloved as the original. Hell, it's my personal favorite of the franchise. No one gives it shit for aping off the original because it's just that good. And I guess at the end of the day, that's really all it comes down to. As much as I plant my flag on the idea that the nostalgia bait in movies these days is a massive problem, which I think it is, it's really more of an issue of execution. The difference between brilliance and being a hack is just getting away with it. If it works, no one cares. You can tell more or less the exact same story again and again as long as it's a good ass movie. If it's not though, or the reused elements don't mesh well, it's going to drag down your film perhaps more than it deserves, and that's all anyone will bring up when they talk about it. Is that fair? No, but that is the reality of making movies in the franchise space. It is a very tough tightrope to walk, and most movies can't do it all the way from beginning to end. Romulus comes close though, and for that I think I'll always be a defender of it. Maybe not every part of it, but that last act is not indicative of everything it has to offer. And hey, if you just remove the dead guy from the movie, I'd be willing to give it a pass on pretty much all the rest. Just something to consider. Or maybe we should all take the advice from Ridley Scott and just not give a shit about any of this. Seems to be working just fine for him.
I have a view, I hate to use the word vision, but I do have a vision. I know exactly what I want. That's why everyone is going, what the fuck's the table? Fucking hologram. And I think eventually you have to say, honestly, shut the fuck up.